Okay, now you can hold it.
Okay, now what do I do? Nothing?
No, just hold it up. All right, go.
You need more light?
No.
Is that too much light?
No, that's good. Okay, my name is Victoria Stanley, and I'm doing my presentation and my speech on nonverbal communication and the way that it enhances our day-to-day communication, the negative side effects of nonverbal communication, or the ways that it can be misunderstood, and the way that it impacts our personal relationships. Nonverbal cues affect our everyday life. When I'm talking to someone and they say, "Hey, I need you to pick that up," but they don't point at anything, you're kind of looking around the room like, "Okay, what am I supposed to pick up?" But if they say, "Hey, can you pick that up?" and they point to a book on the floor, then you instantly know what to go pick up, and promptly you can do that for them without any miscommunication. This is important because we often forget about the facial expressions that we make, the hand gestures that we make, whether we're slouching or we're sitting upright, and we forget about eye contact and the way we laugh and stuff. That is all nonverbal communication, and it shows somebody whether we're interested or not interested in what they're saying. Nonverbal communication plays an important role in the way we understand one another. It can enhance our conversations, but it can also be misunderstood. I use nonverbal communication in my everyday life. When I'm talking to my dog, I usually either point at him to do something, or point at the couch to tell him to go to the couch, or I snap my fingers to tell him to sit, or you give him a look to suggest that you want him to do something. Now, he doesn't always pick up on those nonverbal cues. However, those are nonverbal cues that we use to suggest something to be done. I've spent time in a communications course learning about nonverbal communication and other forms of communication. I've also done some research online to learn about nonverbal communication and the way that it impacts our day-to-day lives and our personal relationships. So throughout the speech, I'm going to talk about what is nonverbal communication, how we can use it to enhance our conversations with one another, and how nonverbal communication can be misunderstood, whether from the receiving end or from the giving end, and how nonverbal communication affects our personal relationships, how it can impact it and how it can negatively impact it. Now that I have established the basis of the speech, we're going to talk about nonverbal communication and what it is.
3 points.
It's important to understand what nonverbal communication is before we get into that, and if we understand it, we can enhance conversations. That way you're getting your message across as clearly as possible with no room for error. Nonverbal communication is defined as communication such as gestures and facial expressions that do not involve verbal communication, but which may include nonverbal aspects of speech itself. This can include emoticons when you're texting, eye rolls, laughs, postures, any gestures that you do when you're talking to somebody else. It can include when you're talking to somebody and you're closing your eyes, falling asleep. It all signals some type of message to somebody else. It can be from someone sending a nonverbal message, receiving a nonverbal message, or a combination of both. It can be when you interact with one another. It doesn't have to be one person sending a message and that's just it. An example of this is when you wink at somebody and you let them know you are joking about something. You are the sender and they are the receiver. You want them to understand the message that you're conveying. Nonverbal communication can assist you in your day-to-day life. Understanding nonverbal cues can allow you to understand someone's emotions and or feelings towards something, even when they aren't verbally communicating that to you. For example, when you go to a friend's house and they have been crying, but they don't want to tell you what that they're upset, so they say they're fine when you ask them what's wrong. You can obviously see that they've been crying. That's a nonverbal cue that you can pick up on to understand that there's something wrong and there may be something that you can do to help them. Nonverbal communication can help you be a better communicator altogether. You will be able to use nonverbal cues to get your message across in a better manner to the person that you are conversing with. For example, when you go to give somebody a hug, you are sending a message that you love them, you are sorry if they are sad, or a combination of both. It also lets that person know that you are there for them if they need you. And that's all without saying anything. You don't have to say a word with doing that. However, using verbal communication with nonverbal communication enhances the conversation style. Another way that nonverbal communication can help in your everyday conversation is by being able to pick up on other people's nonverbal cues. It's easy to give nonverbal cues and expect other people to understand what you're saying or the message that you're trying to convey, but you have to be aware of other people's nonverbal cues as well. For example, when you're in a meeting with a coworker and a boss, like a bunch of coworkers and a boss, and you are the one leading the meeting, and your boss is sitting there constantly checking his watch, the nonverbal cue that is given there is that you're taking too much time and he's got other things to do. So if you pick up on that nonverbal cue and you know to watch out for that, you'll understand that you need to wrap up and you need to like move on with other things. Otherwise, he's going to think that you take up too much of his time, that you're not doing things right or stuff, and you don't want that message to be conveyed from you as well. It can be easy to convey the wrong message and to receive a nonverbal message incorrectly. Misunderstanding someone's nonverbal message can have consequences in your conversation style. I came across this example of a hug again, except this time someone gave another person a hug at a funeral. This can signify that you're sorry for their loss, but without understanding the context and without some verbal communication, it can also send a different message, such as, we can now finally get our hands on the inheritance money. And we don't want that to be conveyed. So when giving a nonverbal communication cue, you need to make sure that you understand the context of the situation, and if there's any room for misunderstanding, you need to make sure that you are also using some verbal cues. You signify when you give that person a hug, I am sorry for your loss, so that way it doesn't signify anything else in the meantime. If you misunderstand someone's nonverbal message, you may get the idea when someone is winking at you to indicate a joke that they're actually into you. And then you may act on that and go up to them and then be disappointed when you find out that that's not what they intended and you completely took the message wrong. There can be consequences when you don't understand a nonverbal cue. It's important to always read the situation, understand what the nonverbal cue goes with in the conversation. But you can also send the wrong message to somebody. Nonverbal cues can have multiple meanings. So again, it's important to understand the message that you're trying to send. That way there is no room for communication. If you are intentionally sending a certain message and not just doing a bunch of gestures or a bunch of nonverbal cues, then there's no room for error. For example, when going to give the hug at the funeral again, you go up and you make sure that you give them a hug and you say, I'm sorry for your loss. That way there's no room for a wrong message. Sometimes the way that you hug someone can send the wrong message. If you hug someone for too long, it can show that you are interested when that may not be the case at all. And if you hug somebody from a distance, it can show that you're uncomfortable, and it can show that you're not interested at all, which are things that you may not be meaning to convey, but it does convey that through those nonverbal cues. The importance is to just be aware of the nonverbal cues that you're sending and the messages that people are receiving when you're doing these nonverbal cues along with your conversation. While knowing how nonverbal communication can help you and how it can be misunderstood is important, it's also important to understand how much it impacts your personal relationships. Nonverbal communication is used in our personal relationships more than we think it is. We use nonverbal cues to fuel our conversations. The array of cues that you send a relative that you send and receive that allow you and a friend to smoothly and effortlessly take turns while conversating. So when we're talking with a friend, we either stop talking and become silent, and then the next person is signaled to speak. You don't have to say, okay, it's your turn, or anything like that. They pick up on those cues. Or you do a hand gesture or a nod or something like that. But they're all nonverbal cues to signify to your friend to keep the conversation going. You show interest in the other person's information by making eye contact, using good posture, leaning forward, smiling or nodding your head, and other things. This keeps your personal relationships intact because it lets the other people know that you value them and that you're interested in what they have to say. It's also important in our personal relationships because it can let someone know whether you're happy or upset. For example, your significant other did something wrong and you're mad. You don't want to say anything, and so you go around and you're mad and you're either being short with them or you're not saying anything at all. You're giving them the silent treatment. Well, those nonverbal cues let them know that something is wrong and that they need to fix it without you actually having to say anything. It lets the person that you know that let the person that care about you know that they need to do something in order to fix things to make them better, so that way you can grow in your personal relationships. Healthy relationships come from understanding nonverbal cues. John Carton and colleagues performed a study to show that nonverbal cues play an important role in maintaining successful relationships. Again, this is shown when couples understand that their significant other is upset with them without having to say anything, or that they're happy without having to say anything also. You give a smile, or you're crying, or something like that. It can signal that you're happy or sad or mad, and that things are going good or bad, and either way, it strengthens your relationship. Nonverbal communication plays an important role in our personal relationships, but it's also seen that it has other important aspects as well. So, we've talked about how nonverbal communication is essential in enhancing our conversations if you know how to properly convey these nonverbal cues. We've also seen that nonverbal cues can be misunderstood by the receiver and the sender. You can send the wrong message, and you can also receive the message wrong. And we've learned that nonverbal cues are essential in our personal relationships in order to keep them healthy. Overall, nonverbal communication plays an important role in the way we understand one another. It can enhance our conversations, but it can also derail them and have consequences. It's important to understand how nonverbal communication affects our daily lives, how we can use it to better ourselves by providing proper nonverbal cues, how we can learn to not receive a message wrong, and how we can learn to send the message correctly, and how we can better our understanding so that when we converse with those close to us, we can maintain healthy relationships.